Ahshuwah, what's up, man? Good to
What's up,
see you.
Jordan? Yeah, good to see you.
All right, so Ahshuwah, for those who may not be acquainted, why don't you just kind of give an introduction? Who you are, what do you do, and yeah, what's your connection to Bitcoin?
Sure. Well, I'm kind of like a missionary entrepreneur, you could say. I enjoy starting things. I get maybe bored easily, and so it's
Hmm.
new ideas come, and there's always multiple things cooking at one time.
Hmm.
And as a missionary, finances were always really tight over the years. And before that, I was church planting, and also, yeah, money was tight. So I always had to be creative with money. So I
Yep.
started studying finance and investing and like value investing and security analysis
Yep.
and all that. And that kind of laid the groundwork for seeing the value proposition of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Cool.
Yeah.
And we'll get more into that in a little bit. I do want you to speak about that. So we are. What is the purpose of this? So the purpose of this, we just want to do like a recap of Pacific Bitcoin, the Pacific Bitcoin Conference. For those of you guys who don't know, that was Ashu and I and a bunch of our, let's see, 1,200 of our closest friends were out in L.A., Santa Monica area, for the second largest, maybe the largest Bitcoin only conference that's ever existed. I do believe. And so yeah, so we were out there. It was great. And what I want to do, I just kind of, it was a 2 day conference, and so what I want to do, Ashwa, is just kind of get your, you were there. What kind of stuck out to you? What did you enjoy? Yeah, just what were some of your biggest takeaways from the event? We're gonna kind of go like do like a day by day, breakdown after this. But kind of what were your big takeaways from your time out there?
Yeah. So this is my second in-person Bitcoin conference. I went to the big one in Miami earlier this year,
Yep. Yep.
and for anyone that is like first experiencing an in-person Bitcoin event, it feels like a huge family reunion,
Yeah.
or just like a hangout time, nonstop. And so yeah, so I think that's what stands out. It was it was deeply relational. I traveled with two coworkers, one old friend, one new friend. Met up with you guys,
Yep.
and honestly, I think I only went to about 10% of the sessions
Yeah.
because there was so much going on relationally,
Yeah.
and so now I get to kind of go back through them afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, Ashwa, let me explain like our connection to you. So we did the event in Miami, the Thank God for Bitcoin conference 1 day event, and we just had we had this situation where we get there, we're setting everything up, and then we just realize, oh wait, there's people, we need people to do this, and we just didn't have anybody, and so Ashwa was one of the first people who just jumped right up and said, hey, like I'll man a table. And so he just started checking people in, and so we met there and have just been in touch ever since, talking about a bunch of different things related to TGFB, related to ministry. So yeah, so thanks for being here. I appreciate you in that regard. And I think my takeaway, yeah, again, is very similar this time as it was in Miami. It was just the relational time is the most valuable thing about this entire event. I literally did not sit through a single seminar, a single one of the little half-hour presentations. I was not there for a single one of them. Was just walking around the whole, other than the one that I was in, other than the one that we spoke for a half hour, but literally none of the other ones. But I do think, again, your point about just being there with family is just so right on, because you're on Bitcoin Twitter, you're hanging around with, you might have a couple people in your actual everyday life who are Bitcoiners, but to be in one place where there's 1,200 of you, and yeah, you can talk Bitcoin, like there's just a bunch of stuff going on. For me, it's just a blast. It's so much fun, and yeah, just the immersive experience of yeah, just seeing other people from around the world, from all kinds of different walks of life, different businesses, yeah, who came to Bitcoin from for all kinds of different reasons. It's just fascinating and super enjoyable. So what I want to do is we can kind of talk through. We'll just go through the 2 days of the conference. So the first day was Wednesday, or sorry, actually the day before the conference was Wednesday, and so that was TGFB. We did like a quick meetup, like a 3 or 4 hour meetup. So yeah, we booked a little venue. It was a little comedy club. and we decided to lean fully into the stereotype and ordered Chick-fil-A. We ordered Chick-fil-A sandwiches and just hung out. And so yeah, so was there anything that stuck out to you from that? Like, was there anybody who like you got to talk to that who you didn't know or you found valuable?
So yeah, that was a totally rad time, and I think something that stood out both with that meeting and then as well as the other you say followers of Jesus that we met through the week is just like the caliber and the seriousness of the Christians that are in this space. And the number of them that are there, and so these are folks. This is not a religious space. This is this is like combination of tech and finance and innovation and kind of a little bit of ideology, some politics, some like there's this big mix of things, and everyone enters the space for a different reason. But there's just something unique about the followers of Christ that do enter this space, and you could say go down that rabbit hole. Like they're all just really serious about their faith, and the only thing that they're more stoked on than Bitcoin is Jesus. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but it really struck me again to meet the folks that are there are just totally seeing their role in this industry, whether it's vocationally or just on their kind of side passion. It's kingdom work for them.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can get into this. One of the things that just impressed me the most and that kind of blew me away was like it's one thing. It would be one thing if people were just there to like get something and then go apply it to like where they're at, to their whether they're working in a church or working just in a normal business. It would be easy to kind of go there and come there, get something that you can use, and then come back. What has been a pleasant surprise for me was, and we first ran into this in Miami, was was just running into each other and being like, man, I just got to share the gospel with like this person over here. And then Ahshuwah was like, man, I just shared the gospel for like an hour with this person over here. And so I just think that was something that I was not expecting, was just being able to find so many like-minded people in that regard. I think again, for us, and this is, I mean, there's people who are in Bitcoin for Bitcoin's sake. And then I just feel like there's a ton of Christians who we're going to use the living daylights out of Bitcoin for Jesus' sake. And that was never as clear to me as when it was, I believe it was the last day, so we're skipping ahead a little bit, but the last day of the conference, there was a guy who I had met who was a Christian from the Seattle area. And I said, hey man, let me come introduce you to some other Christian Bitcoiners. I walked over to the table where you and a bunch of other guys are sitting around. There were 5 guys sitting at the table, and I realized as I looked around at them, all 5 of them were Christian missionaries. And it just blew my mind. I was like, what is going on right now? And again, we're talking like some people like have ministered in the Middle East, have ministered, with in underground churches, like, I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And then the discussion that was going on just was blowing my mind. So like, talk a little bit about that. You were there for that conversation. Like is that something that you were expecting going in? I mean, and coming to some of these events, or like, what were your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So, just maybe a helpful clarification. Like, as I think about missionary, I know, like, if there's Bitcoiners listening to this who aren't Christians, for a missionary, it doesn't mean it's just like a Christian salesman, right?
Yeah.
Like. Yeah. These are the Christians that have a deep burden for the world, that see the world, and they're like, hey, I want to make a difference globally. And often, right, I mean, we all grew up in the West, at least I have, and so there's luxury, there's fiat privilege, right, that we have in the West. And so when you look out at the world and you're like, hey, not only do they not have a witness for Christ, but they don't have so many of the resources that we have. And so these are believers that say, hey, you know what? I want to give my life for the sake of the nations and to make a difference in the world, whether it's specific like economic community development, if it's charity work, whether it's like you and I have done church planting, starting communities of faith that seek to bring the kingdom into their communities. So yeah, it's these type of people that are thinking globally, that we met up, and one of the funny kind of interactions, conversations is this guy comes up and he sees my buddy Nate, and he's like, "Oh, I've seen him before. Where did I see him before?" Because he had gone up, and a whole other funny stories about all us spinning the wheel. if you noticed, a bunch of us got up there. There's a little I don't know, an unplanned conspiracy about that, but so anyway, he's like, "I recognize that guy. Where do I know that from? What, was he in some like Bitcoin podcast or something?" And then he realized that it was my buddy that had led a like missions conference about a month prior, and he and his wife and kids had attended that mission conference, and then here they are randomly meeting up at a Bitcoin conference. And so there's an overlap with believers that have a burden for the globe and for God's kingdom, for justice among the nations, and for Bitcoin as one of the tools that can make a difference.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it. Again, that seems weird to me if you're a Bitcoiner and you're not a Christian. You're like, what on earth is going on here? But like the point to realize is that these guys who are missionaries, again, they're working with all kinds of issues. So this remittance issue that in Bitcoin minds is a couple years old. Like this isn't something I feel like people have been talking about in Bitcoin for 10 years. Like this is more of a recent thing, but that's been an issue that like Ahshuwah in your work, like that's been something you've been aware of and been working with and trying to figure out ways around for a number of years. And so just like issues like those are something that people within this missions community, I mean, they're trying to steward not only the lives of people, but they're stewarding hundreds of millions of dollars. And trying to be as good as stewards of those resources as possible. And so something like Bitcoin can literally save them millions of dollars over the course of a number of years. So I think that was a really cool thing. Also on that front, you mentioned the wheel. We'll talk about that a little bit because there's one story that's just bonkers. There's a buddy of ours who we won't mention his name because he does some ministry in some like some rough parts of the world. But he ended up, Ahshuwah, you went on stage and you were able to spin this wheel. It was sponsored by Fold, for those of you guys who know. Fold has like a Bitcoin rewards debit card. If you don't know what that is, go look up. It's incredible. But they sponsored this wheel where you got selected to go up on stage and push this button and spin this wheel, and you could win up to like a Bitcoin. They knew like they were going to give away 1 Bitcoin over the course of 2 days. So you probably had 30 people spin this wheel. You have a 1 in 30 chance of winning a Bitcoin. So Ahshuwah went up there. He spun. He didn't win. This other guy, Nate, went up there and spun and didn't win. This other buddy, who we won't mention his name, he got up there. It was him and another guy. They were going to spin. It was the last day of the conference. There were probably only going to be another 6 or 7 people who were going to spin, including me. I'm not, no hard feelings. I'm not bitter at all. And so this guy was supposed to be the first one on stage, and he said to the guy who was with him, "Hey man, why don't you go first? Why don't you go first? You go ahead." So the guy went ahead, and Ahshuwah, what happened?
Yeah. Well, let me even give a little bit more background.
Okay, go for it. Do it.
We were able to go on stage because we figured out the gal she randomly came up to us and said, "Hey, I need 3 people to come on stage right now." And it was randomly our group of guys. And then there's this other gal that went up. And so that's kind of how that first happened and got the ball rolling there. But I had some other friends from Portland who I was chatting with, and I pointed out the gal. I'm like, "Oh, that's her over there." And maybe if you go up and talk to her, maybe you'll be able to go up on stage. And so they go up and they talk to her, and one of them gets a spot, and so they agree to share their winnings, right? Yeah. Hey, if we win the Bitcoin, we'll split it. And then I jokingly said, "Well, hey, remember, I'm the one that told you about this." So, and I had shared with them about this nonprofit that I help lead in here in Portland. And I said, "How about you guys tithe? Give 10% to the nonprofit if you guys win." And they're like, "Sure." So lo and behold, And then our other buddy, we were gonna split it if he won it. So
Yeah.
as it was the friend that from Portland that went first
Yeah.
and spun it, and he won the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it hasn't happened yet, but I have a commitment for him to he's gonna donate to our work that we're doing here.
Yeah. So his buddy, like he goes, the missionary guy goes, here, why don't you go ahead? And so this guy goes ahead and then wins the Bitcoin is the thing. And so we were all like, oh man. So again,
close.
I didn't see him crying. He seemed like he was pretty well under control. Speaking of that, I have to mention something else. Speaking of Portland was very well represented. Let me grab this real quick. I don't know who this guy was, but this guy had these hats. And so we ended up, he has, do you remember his name? He's a bald guy. I don't remember his name.
He was in on the Bitcoin.
He was the deal.
Other guy.
Oh, okay. So man. So anyhow, so he had these hats. Hopefully we can figure out where, like, it's a great hat. I was just like looking, I was like, man. So we ended up doing a little hat swap. He's one of, I believe, 2 people who's got a TGFB hat other than us so far. We're
Dude, you were supposed to hook me up, man. You promised me.
I'm so sorry. I had it in my backpack. And totally forgot. So we'll get it to you. We'll get it to you. But yeah, and so for everybody else, the merch store will be TGFB merch store will be live soon. But yeah, okay. So that was one thing. Another thing was so let's go back to so that was the day before we did the TGFB event. It was a few hours. Then we did the next day. So let's see, Thursday. So we had a TGFB panel. It was hosted by Jeremy Showalter, who is one of the VPs of product at Swan Bitcoin, which is a great place to buy Bitcoin. And so he's a believer and hosted that panel. And then on the panel were myself, Robert Breedlove, who's one of the other authors of Thank God for Bitcoin, and then David Catrone, who's my business partner with TGFB Media. So the 3 of us went up there, and Ahshuwah was conspicuously absent to start out. I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit offended. I was offended, and then 5 minutes in, they showed up, and so then the offense diminished. But no, so it was a great time. Again, Jeremy was just asking us. He just did like a quick overview of how did you guys get started with the book? What did that process look like? And then transitioning from the book to the conference that we did this past year, and then the conference to the company. So we just kind of talked through some of those things, and I'm trying to think. Ahshuwah, was there any takeaways for you from that? Is there anything like stuck out that impacted you or no? Not really.
Well, I mean, I'll
putting you on the spot.
I'll throw in the joke that I was glad to get the shout out.
Yeah. Yes. There we go. So yeah. I mean, it just was. It was a great time. It filled up about halfway through. And yeah, so just talking through like what does this look like? What again, a lot of the people who were there like were not Christians. So again, this was kind of like an intro to them. Like why do these Christians like care so much about this, and what does this look like? And so we did our best to kind of explain that. All right, so we did that, and then for the rest of those 2 days, I mean, I was just like I said, I didn't watch a single one of the sessions. I watched a little bit of Sailor's session, which was the very last day, the very last session. But other than that, they had. I mean, it was. I've heard a lot of people say it was the best Bitcoin conference they've ever been to. We're kind of limited in our ability to agree with them, but listen, it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. Were there any of the sessions that you did sit through that you felt like there's something that you took away from that you feel like it would be valuable for people to know?
Yeah, so I've been going back through them. So I listened to Sailor now.
Perfect.
I was just listening to the Lynn Alden Preston Pitch interview.
Yep.
And that really struck me as something that I want to share with friends and missions coworkers, because she really touches on the global impact potential piece. And in fact, one of the things that she talks about that another good friend of ours is doing in East Africa, which is using like we hear about the idea of taking stranded energy, right, and doing Bitcoin mining there, but they're starting with the people, taking stranded people that don't have electric grids and is not enough population to pay for the capex and investments to get power to the people, and so they're using Bitcoin mining as the first and primary purchaser of electricity
Wow.
that can then get phased out for the infrastructure. And so, yeah, Lynn Alden actually touched on that and talked about that use case. So that, yeah, I'm stoked on that. I'm glad that kind of
Yeah.
is getting
Well,
shared
here
more
let's
broadly.
just kind of explain that a little bit again, because we're gonna have people who they're not really Bitcoin. I mean, they're not Bitcoiners, and they're just not into it yet. This is new, so kind of can you explain like what does that look like? What would that look like when these companies do that? You explained a little bit, but why don't you expand on it a little bit more?
Yeah. So, and this is in the area not so much of like you could say relief or charity, but more on the community development and an economic development piece where you have a village or a community, and hey, they have clean water, yes, they have food, like they farm, like it's not immediate relief kind of like Compassion International stuff, but they're off the grid. They don't have internet connection. They're not able to advance themselves and connect globally to the world because they're just not connected. And so, and then the problem is, maybe you could set up a hydroelectricity source, or you could do solar or wind, or like you could set up power for them, but their community is not big enough. Maybe it's just a few thousand people. Maybe there's not enough of them to purchase that and justify the expense. And so they continue to be without power and connectivity. And so Bitcoin mining is a way to be a primary purchaser of energy. Bitcoin mining uses a whole lot of energy, and in this use case, that's a really good thing because it means you can build a power station. You can build out a grid, and the mining can purchase all that electricity, and then maybe the community starts by only buying 10 or 20% of it. But if you have that, now they can build out. Now industry and commerce and industry, it can grow. And then that Bitcoin mining can slowly fade out. And so it's like the kickstart that could kickstart like a little mini industrial revolution and prosperity in a community. And then when now the community needs all that electricity, they can pack up their ASICs,
Bitcoin miners,
and go to their miners and go to the next community and do this whole thing again. Yeah,
it's an incredible incentive alignment. That's the thing. Is just like. Putting together the right combination of incentives in order to, bring about human flourishing in places where it's not happening. I just think, that's producing a whole lot more stability and growth in people's lives, and so again, this is an example of using tools. Again, this is not Bitcoin for Bitcoin's sake. This is Bitcoin for people's sake, and this is a big thing that within like the Christian Bitcoin community is putting the emphasis. Putting that emphasis in the right place of like emphasizing what Bitcoin, we value Bitcoin because of what it can do, not because it is money necessarily. We appreciate what money does, what sound money does, and the value that it provides to people.
For what it's worth,
in
Solomon Ecclesiastes says money answers everything. So
there you go.
It's in the Bible. It is Ecclesiastes though. So
it is. Yeah, you're like kind of how much do I put stock in this? But because Solomon was kind of depressed. I feel like through most of that book. So you're like, how do I take this? Okay, appreciate you laying that out. Appreciate you explaining that more. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else? Any of the other sessions or conversations? Man, we had some really good food. That's one of the things that stuck out to me from the time there was, LA has some good food. We had some Mediterranean food on that. What was that? Was it Thursday night or Wednesday night? It was one of those.
Well, for my group, that's literally almost all we ate because I'm doing like the beef carnivore diet. Okay. I've been on for about two months, and so Mediterranean, where you can get kebabs and like lamb. Oh my
gosh, it was so good.
Like that's just like the perfect way to get good red meat.
Yeah.
So
the lamb,
a whole lot of it.
The lamb kebab was so good. I just can't believe it was the best gyro I've ever had in my life. It was so good. Okay, so then we went from there. We went to the second day. We went to some there's some parties again, like the parties of just spending time together afterwards and just talking to people, meeting people. yeah, just there's so many people from so many different walks of life that yeah, just meeting. I mean, there was a couple of guys. One of them was a fireman and like a little bit of an investor. He's a believer as well. We got to meet. I mean, we just met a ton of believers. I mean, how many? There were probably 40 Christians who came to the Thank God for Bitcoin event on the day before the conference started. But it just continues to kind of blow my mind the number of Christians who we just continue to meet. Yeah, it just is not something that it's not that it's unintuitive, but it's just not something you think about. You think about, oh, this is a Bitcoin conference, but there's just tons of people who are thinking about, who either work in. I mean, I think there was one guy, Bob. Bob works in Christian education. He works for a Christian school, and he's he's investigating ways to use Bitcoin, like to teach Bitcoin education within this Christian school to help them understand, what money is and educate them in as far as Bitcoin itself, but then money more broadly in a Christian school. These are things, just these ideas, just trying to think of outside of the box educational opportunities that Bitcoin provides. And so again, I get to spend a lot of time with him. We've been interacting back and forth for a while on Twitter. And so this is the first time we were able to hang out in person. I really appreciated that. So Bob, you're the man. I'm trying to think. Ryan, we mentioned you. Ryan is a firefighter. He's a great guy as well. Another guy, JD, was a great guy. He's a filmmaker we spent some time with. And so, yeah, we're actually investigating, working together on some projects for Thank God for Bitcoin. So, yeah, man, I just had a blast. I was just really grateful for the time that we were able to spend. Is there anything else? Again, we're probably closing here. We got another 5 minutes or so. Is there anything else that you feel like would be valuable to mention to maybe people who weren't able to be there, weren't able to experience being there?
So, I mean, probably the big takeaway for me is actual like ministry and business connections where I've had all these different ideas swirling around and all these conversations. Like you and me, we've been talking about this stuff for almost a year, and to kind of get in the same place. And one of the things we've been wrestling with and ideas we've been kind of exploring is like putting together a roster of experts that we can then take to bring into different faith-based Christian organizations or churches and say, hey, you have questions about the taxes, you have questions about the like accounting, or you want to hear the investment proposition, all this, and then we can help them think through how they can use Bitcoin for missions and for creative access and for economic development, all this stuff. But what just kind of, I think the light bulb that went on for us and clicked was that rather than trying to go to the unconvinced and go to like legacy organizations that are very much just kind of, they do their thing, and Christian organizations tend to be more conservative, right? You don't want to hitch your wagon to some scam and some like new technology that's going to blow up and crash, and so it's much easier to be conservative and safe, and I don't know. I don't have that problem, right? I'm more of an entrepreneur. I'm not trying to lead this old like an established organization that has donors and all these things.
Good save.
Yeah. I'm like able to like try out new ideas, and as an entrepreneur, I want to be able to do that. And so we realized rather than trying to convince the unconvinced, we're going to just start something new and do some prototypes on the field, on the ground, globally, using Bitcoin as a tool in our like toolkit for missions, and then just see if God blesses it and gather the stories and then take those to bring back. And that was just a different way to kind of think through the process. And we're stoked on that because Christians within the Bitcoin space don't need to be convinced. And we can just go and invite them to, whether they're funding, whether they're participating in the work we're doing, we can just build a team of the already orange-pilled Jesus lovers and then go do kingdom work globally.
No, and I love it. And we're going to be talking more about that in the future. So here in this podcast and other mediums as well. So, well, man, Ahshuwah, I appreciate your help. Appreciate your time. Where can people find you? Why don't if people find you on Twitter, is there other places you want them to find you?
Yes,
you haven't actually. I forgot that you just had a recent little mishap on Twitter. So what?
Oh yeah, Elon. Like the day Elon took over, my account was flagged for suspicious activity. There was nothing
The
specific that I
worst.
did, but they're like, this appears to be, yeah, like scamming activity or something. I'm like, what do you like?
Oh
So
man.
and then a
Yeah.
week later they apologized. We're sorry. We and so yes, I'm back.
So you got it back?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So it's IAHSH.
Okay.
I've been around for a while, so I got a nice short handle.
Yeah, man. I'm so
But
jealous. Oh,
I mostly lurk. But yeah, come follow me, and I would love to interact on Kingdom Ideas.
cool. Awesome. Asha, appreciate your time, man, and we'll be in touch. And again, like I said, there's many more conversations to have around this. But yeah, I appreciate your doing a Pacific Bitcoin recap with me. All right.
Lots
Talk soon.
Good time.
All right. Bye-bye.